Oh. I was thinking how to start this presentation, and it occurred to me that starting from the beginning is usually a good idea. So, 200,000 years ago, humans stepped on Earth for the first time. And do you know what's different between humans and all other animals in this world? Any idea? Yes? I don't know. No idea? Well, one thing that makes us very different to all animals in the world is that we have incredibly huge heads. And because of these huge heads, we come to this world incomplete. If you see other animals, after a few hours of being born, they are already running and doing a lot of stuff. For us humans, it takes us, for some of us, some 20-something years to learn how to be self-sufficient in this world. So learning is really vital for humans. So in all these years, how have we learned? Well, for 160,000 years, more or less, we learned without the use of any known technology. We learned by trial and error, word of mouth, and imitation. But we are smart, and some 40,000 years ago, we discovered how to put our thoughts on the walls of caves. And then 4,500 years ago, more or less, we discovered how to print our thoughts on leaves of papyrus. So we were able to transport our knowledge with us. Then on the 15th century, in the middle of the 15th century, the printing press was discovered and a mass production of books started. Nowadays, at the reach of our hands, with a smart device connected to the internet, we have virtually access to all the information in the world. So what is next on learning? How can we continue using technologies to improve learning? A very wise man, some few thousand years ago, said, "For the things we have to learn before we can do them, we learn them by doing them. For example, men become builders by building, and lyre players by playing the lyre. So we become just by doing just acts, temperate by doing temperate acts, brave by doing brave acts." What Aristotle pointed out is that there's an active component in learning. And I'm going to talk to you about interactive learning technologies. So I arrived. I was thinking of, okay, what were the first interactive learning technologies? And it was really difficult to come up with one. And maybe I'm completely wrong, but I think this is one of the first interactive learning technologies that appeared in the world. Do you know what it is? Do you know why is it a learning technology? Yes, it's an observatory. 2 times a year, the sun comes exactly from one of the little squares there. So this technology helps us to learn on how the Earth moves around the sun. Maybe it's not really interactive, but I leave it that to you. So let's go to something that was really more interactive. And I found this. This is a teaching machine invented by Sidney Presley. I did research on this, and unfortunately, this is the only picture I have. I have no idea how it worked. But then in the middle of the 1950s, this happened. Okay, I have a positive reinforcement for the person who tells me who is this guy. Very good. So yes, it's B.F. Skinner, one of the immortals in the learning sciences, I would say. Then we come to 1981. Anybody knows what happened in 1981 that changed the world? No? Yes, the first personal computer appeared. And very soon after the first personal computer appeared, the first intelligent tutoring system started to appear, like this Lisp tutor system. Now I want to take a break a little bit, and I want to ask you to remember when was the last time you really learned something and really understood and get this aha moment. I want to think, what were you doing at that time? Okay, did you think a little bit? Well, okay, let's continue. Were you doing something like this? Or were you doing something more similar to this? Well, my proposal is that learning does not necessarily happen when we are directly interacting with a computer. Learning can happen in a wide different variety of scenarios. And in order to capture learning and make interactive learning technologies in these different scenarios, I think we need to have sensors. What are sensors? Where a sensor is a device which detects, measures a physical property, and records, indicates, or otherwise responds to it. So what are sensors? Some examples of sensors can be cameras, microphones, accelerometers, thermometers, Wi-Fi antennas, GPS devices, you name them. Okay, I started my PhD about sensors in learning, and the first question I always got asked by everybody is, what sensors are you using? And let me demonstrate you how I answer this question. Imagine that you are blind, and so you cannot see, and you hear this message, or this audio. So you hear that with your ears, and you identify that you're in an airport. But you can also use a GPS to tell you that you're in an airport. So my point here is that the specific sensor is not really that important. What is important are the inferences you can get out of the sensor data. I continued my research on sensors in learning, and I discovered that sensors could be used to support the cognitive domain of learning, the affective domain of learning, and the psychomotor domain of learning. One example of the cognitive domain of learning is you get a tour guide, a mobile tour guide for a city that you want to visit, and it has a GPS device, and it can tell you and guide you where you want to go, and once you find a landmark that is interesting, some extra information about the landmark appears, and maybe you get some augmented reality thing and look how the landmark looked 100 years ago and so on. That's one way sensors can support the cognitive domain. Also, another way they can support the cognitive domain is by collecting data. In this study, what people do, they wanted to investigate how the noise was distributed across a city. And so they asked people to download the application with the mobile phones, and mobile phones have microphones and also have GPS devices. And so they were collecting data of what's the volume in different parts of the city, and it helped these researchers to learn about the noise distribution in a city. Then the affective domain, I like this example. This example is supposed to help people to learn how to have healthier eating habits, and it uses some skin conductance sensors to track how aroused you are, and also you have the application connected to a mobile device. So if you're aroused and you're approaching a refrigerator fridge, at that moment you get a pop-up telling, are you really hungry and that's the reason you want to eat, or is it just because you're aroused? Then I think the psychomotor domain is the most common that we have all seen. We have seen these fitness trackers that teach you more or less how to have a more healthier lifestyle, or running watches with GPS and heart monitors that tell you how fast you need to run, so on. Now, I want to talk to you about some limitations about sensors. When you program something, some learning program on your computer, and you put there a login button, if the user presses the login button, it's really obvious to know that, okay, the user wants to log in. But sensor data, it's pretty messy, and it's very difficult to interpret. So my argument is that in order to help with that, we need to have multiple modalities. And one example of why we need multiple modalities is this. Can you tell me which instrument is being played here?
He's singing.
Okay. And then can you tell me which instrument is playing here? I think yes, right? It's a piano. But what about here? That becomes a little bit more tricky, right? So you probably need more senses to know what's really happening. Okay, another reason why I think we need more modalities is that for some moments I want you to close your eyes and imagine that it's a Sunday morning and you're walking on a field and you can see around you some bushes, and then you can hear some birds singing, and you can smell the scent of fresh grass, you can feel the sunlight in your head. Okay, you can open your eyes now. I guess you experience that the more modalities you are, the richer the scenario becomes for you. So that's another thing why I think multimodality is important. The next one is this. So as you experienced, there was always the same scenario, but one different modality changed the whole way how you interpret it. And that's the reason you might need more modalities to get the right interpretation. Last, why I think having multiple modalities is important is and I think that's a reason for having multiple modalities, so that if there's one modality that is very important, you can have more chances to track it. Now let's see how multimodality started in computers. That's how it started. Nowadays, multimodality looks a little bit different. We have augmented reality glasses. We have wearable devices that we can carry with us, and so on. Okay, now I want to show you some examples of multimodal learning technologies that have been used. In this study, what they used, they gave students these empathic bands, and empathic bands are able to track the skin conductance. And with the skin conductance, you can know how aroused are people. And what they discovered is that there's a correlation between the level of arousal of students during the class, during the lectures, and the final grades. In this other study, what they did, they wanted to investigate how collaboration happens in small groups of students when they are creating special artifacts. And they put sensors on the artifacts. They had cameras, they have microphones, and they discovered that there's a correlation between the distance of the hands and the faces of the participants with the quality of the artifact that they produced. This is another example. So the idea about the Wicked project is that for certain tasks, like the procedure that you need to follow before a plane takes off, it's very good if you want to learn what you need to do, to have an expert on your side, guiding you and telling you, okay, unscrew this, then go here, check the oil, then go here, check if this instrument is working correct. And yeah, that's a way to learn. But having an expert always at your side is very difficult. And what they did with this Wicked project is to let an expert record their experience using these augmented reality glasses and some other sensors. So the expert was going through the procedure and saying, okay, here it is important to screw something, then we move to this part and we have to check the oil of the airplane and so on. And then once this recorded was created, anybody as a learner can put in themselves their own sensors, the same augmented reality thing, and get through this experience following the instructions that the system gives you, as if you were together with an expert. So now I can talk about my own research. And I want to show you the presentation trainer. Okay, the story of the presentation trainer started with a presentation trainer that looked like this. We tested this version, and participants loved it. They were really happy to practice their presentation and see some little screen and colors changing and everything moving around. But actually, nobody of them paid attention to the information that the presentation trainer was giving them. And if you ask me, a teacher that everybody loves, but that nobody learns anything from him, it's not a good teacher. So we decided to change it. We made it a little bit more clear. We added icons. To me, it looks much better. So we tried it, and participants hated it. They saw that it is really difficult to practice a presentation while really paying attention about what's happening in this dashboard interface. If you see, there are these hands there, and if a person was not moving their arms for a long time, these arms get red, and it tells move more. And it happened once, and the participants look at that and say, oh, move more, and he started, okay, I need to move more. So what could we learn from that is that a dashboard interface for giving real-time feedback is really not effective. But we didn't give up, and we decided to try a new way of giving feedback. In this case, the presentation trainer gives at most one feedback instruction at a given time. And it waits until the learner corrects his mistake to put the instruction away. We decided, okay, let's try it. And we had an experiment. And the experiment consisted on having people to practice the presentations 5 times. And then after practicing the presentation, they had to do a presentation in front of an audience. And we were going to measure the time that they were doing some mistakes. There was a control group, and the control group presented in a system that looked just like being in front of a mirror. It did not give any feedback. And the treatment group practiced with a version giving feedback. And these were the results. The blue is the control group, and if you see, they never learned anything in terms of making less mistakes. And if you see the other hand, the treatment group, almost in each practice round, they become better and better. And then in the last one, that they didn't have the help of the presentation trainer, they were on their own giving the presentation, they also performed very good. That's awesome, I guess. But still, the amount of mistakes that somebody makes, does that really affect somehow how an audience perceives a presentation? Because the people who really judge a presentation is the audience. So we did another study where we asked participants to give a presentation in front of an audience, and the audience rated the presentation in things like overall quality, confidence of the speaker, and so on. And then after giving the presentation, they went to practice with the presentation trainer 2 more times this presentation and come back to an audience and give it again. And we saw that the audience rated this practice presentation much better in all aspects. So what can we learn from this? What we can learn is that a machine, a system that gives one feedback instruction at a given time and maintains this feedback instruction until the learner changes the behavior, actually helps learners to improve their performance. And the other interesting observation that happened is that when a machine is giving feedback to a person, there is no emotion there. As a human, if you give feedback to another human, there's always a lot of friction and emotion. I mean, I've tried to give feedback to people presenting and telling them, stand a little bit more straight. The first time is okay, and you still say a little bit instead of stand straight. And the second time is like, stand straight. And the third time, you as a teacher get frustrated, and the poor student, as a student, gets completely crushed with his self-esteem. So a system like this, for good and for bad, can allow people to practice all what they want without being judged. These studies work really good. And then I heard about self-reflection and everybody talking about, oh, self-reflection is so good. So I decided, okay, I will add a self-reflection module for the presentation trainer. And with this self-reflection module, you can check how many pauses you did and when did you do them, and you can check a little bit of your gestures and your posture. I think it was very good, but does it really work? Actually, we were not able to measure anything, any improvement with this self-reflection module. We think it's possible because some of the participants were able to recognize that there was something that they didn't like much about what they were doing during the practice sessions, but they didn't know how to improve that. And the other thing that I watch while doing the experiments, but I don't have any empirical evidence, is that some participants, for example, said like, yes, in my next presentation, I want to be more open. So they started the presentation like, okay, hello, I'm Jan, and then they come back to the normal habitual habits. That's what we saw for the self-reflection. Now the boot. I was thinking that, okay, people might know exactly what they need to do in order to present, but they still need to present in front of an audience, and it's really challenging. There's a lot of anxiety to be in front of an audience and everybody listening, and if you know everything you need to do, but at the moment you need to do it, your mind gets completely blank, it doesn't matter how much you practice, it doesn't matter all your knowledge. And this is not only for presentations, I think this is for any case. If a doctor is very good, but at the moment that he needs to open the patient, his hand starts to shake, I think that's a very bad idea. So I was thinking about this problem, and one day I was waiting for an airplane on an airport, and I saw this book that says, Presence, Bringing Your Boldest Self to Your Biggest Challenges. I read the book. I think it was very interesting. I think it supported what I was thinking, and it has very nice exercises like standing like a superhero. And also it tells things that, okay, think about your positive attributes. And I was thinking, yes, this more or less makes sense, but I can imagine myself having to prepare for a presentation and being, yes, I'm going to do great. Yes, I have good memory, and oh my God, what was I going to say on the first slide? Shit. And so I think the exercises are good, but you need some help in order to do them when it's needed. And for that, I created the boot. I had to do it on my free time because I was a little bit ashamed of it. I thought my supervisors were not really going to agree, because it guides you to a series of exercises where you're supposed to become a superhero, where you stand like a superhero, you are forced to smile. If you don't smile, it tells you smile again, and then it lets you know, do the next exercise, and it asks you about which superpowers would you like to have, and you have to select between things that we all have, like confidence, intelligence, and not superpowers like flying, but things that we all humans can have. And then it also asks you about what do you want to bring to the world, and it can be things like love, passion, and so on. So once I finished it, I showed it to my supervisors, and I said, I want to test it, and my supervisors were like, okay, if you want, we're not going to stop you. And I went to a conference to test it. And how did I test it? I had two groups of participants that were going to present in the conference. For some group, what we asked to do, it was we showed them a paper with a list of emotions, and they needed to select how they felt according to the list of emotions. Then they had to study their slides, because that's what we all do before doing a presentation. And after studying the slides, we presented them with this list of emotions, and they have to select how they felt. And we have the treatment group that also filled in this emotion questionnaire, but instead of studying the slides, they follow this boot thing. And what we found is that there were positive and negative emotions in this questionnaire. And for people that use the boot, most of them that reported to have some negative emotion before using it, the negative emotions did not appear in the next questionnaire. In the other hand, the participants that studied their slides, some of them even show that they had a little bit more negative emotions. And then for the positive emotions, it was more or less the same thing. People who use the boot, it's the down part, after using the boot, they reported to have much more positive emotions. And the other group that studied the slides, we cannot say the same. And the group that used the boot actually performed very good at the end. So it worked. And these tools somehow work and are pretty nice, but for some reason, nobody of us has seen them. And whenever I talk to my friends and family of what I do, they think I'm doing science fiction instead of real science. And I was wondering why. I think one of the reasons is hardware costs. Only on recent years, the hardware costs for sensors and this type of devices has become available to the public. But then we have software costs. And yeah, nowadays, if I want to build a presentation trainer, I have to do it by scratch. If somebody else wants to do this Wicked project, they need to do it by scratch. So our idea is that we should have some type of customizable multimodal learning solutions where you select your scenario and you can select some sensors and build it like it was some kind of Legos. And to explain this idea, one of my colleagues is going to do that. But anyway, with this approach and with these two, the multimodal learning hub and the visual inspection tool, in few months we have created a calligraphy tutor that helps people to train calligraphy. we have also added a virtual reality module to the presentation trainer. And we have also this CPR tutor that you just saw. Okay, what I wanted to say, because it's almost the end, is that these tools might look fancy, but if you're really critical, they are not that fancy. They are like these first airplanes that cannot really be compared to a Airbus 380. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do to make them good. However, I think with some work and time, they will become really good. And this got me thinking. At some point, I don't know exactly when, we're going to have these artificial teachers are really going to become more efficient than human teachers. Actually, also artificial workers are going to be more efficient than human workers. Artificial anything is going to become more efficient than humans. So what's the point? What's the value in learning something that at some point, no matter what we learn, an artificial tool is going to make it cheaper, faster, and more precise than us? What's the value of being human then? I really don't know the answers, but what I can know is that in 200,000 years, as it says, we went from chasing mammoths to the moon. And in 200,000 years, which if you see it as a cosmic scale is just less than a blink of an eye, we created a civilization that in terms of complexity outshines anything in the known universe. And I think we should be really proud about it. So I want to invite you that before you return to your regular activities, you think about all this that we have done, embrace who we are with all our faults and all our virtues, and think for a moment where you would like to take your next step into the future.